Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching this. This is Joe Sends Rarest Photos, and we are reading The Ear of the Heart, Dolores Hart's autobiography. Yesterday, obviously, we read some Child Bride. I'm going to try to get some Elvis, Jeannie, and Linda, in later on as well. But we are on chapter 1 of Dolores Hart's autobiography. So, thanks for tuning in. Thank you to you members that have joined recently. Thank you to you subscribers. And for those that have left me super thanks, it's amazing. Appreciate that. I'll give you a shout out probably later on in this afternoon's video. And I also need to do a comment video for y'all too. So let's get started. Without further ado. Chapter 1. There's a tiny room in the basement of the Abbey building at Regina Laudis, just down the hall from the laundry. It measures 8 by 10, but seems smaller because of the things in it. There are 2 tables that by themselves almost fill the space. One against the wall, and the other table serving as a desk in the center of the room. Half of the desk's surface is taken up by a huge cage, home to an African gray parrot named Tobiel, Toby for short, whose vocabulary consists of Toby sweet, go to church, and Mazel tov. I feel like I sound more like Pinocchio there. On the second table sits another even larger cage, home to 8 pairs of finches of various descriptions, next to a cage of normal dimensions accommodating a sick bird. A kind of finch infirmary is what Dolores says. There's a tiled sink that from time to time in the room was used as an art studio, and 2 chairs, both larger than necessary, but all that was available when the room became an office. High up are cupboards, one of which contains leather-bound scripts of 15 movie and TV productions and 1 Broadway play, and another crammed with videotapes and DVDs of films sent by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Sounds like she got some stuff from her past, which is cool. File cabinets of various sizes and styles fill the remaining wall space, providing surfaces for a small refrigerator, a fax machine, 3 telephones, and a heater. A globe of the world as it was known in the 16th century, an anti-pirating DVD player, also a gift from the Academy, books, scrapbooks, journals, and framed photographs, a 28-volume DVD collection of the Carol Burnett TV show, a gift from the star herself to Dolores, which is what I said. She's saying in first person. Christmas ornaments that picture Bob Hope and play his Silver Bells, Silver Bells, the corner sidewalks. Anyways, that's more like Bing Crosby. And several floppy, wide-brimmed garden hats. Hanging on the hooks attached to the door are heavy aprons, a raincoat, craftsman tools, farm utensils, bits of electrical wiring, and some hand-knit sweaters in pastel pink and baby blue. This is Corpus Christi, Mother Dolores' office. It is where, as prioress, she communicates with the outside world, reads and evaluates requests from would-be visitors, arranges living accommodations for guests, oversees, well, she prefers to say undersees, the dramatic productions of the Abbey's Act Association, and visits by professional artists who come by the Abbey to give their talents, and the list is impressive. Considers subjects for the Education Deanery seminars, undersees the photo and video, which is now digital recording of the Abbey life, and most importantly, gives her ear to any member of the community who needs her. She is also available for anything the abbess asks of her. Might that include sweeping the floor? She wouldn't ask that. To the meaning? No. She wouldn't trust me with the broom. Corpus Christi also serves as my office for 2 or 3 months each year during the past 10 years. In that time, for 3.5 hours each afternoon, it was the place where Mother Dolores and I worked together on this manuscript. Now, originally, out of respect for the cloister, we met in one of the abbey parlors. But taping her recollections separated by the grill, which was not recorder friendly, became burdensome. So permission was given for us to work inside the enclosure. Certainly a major exception to cloistered life, and one that added a laptop and tape recorder to the room. Now, to describe the working area as cramped, I need only to say that when both of us were seated, it was impossible for either of us to move without having the other one move too. Our chairs faced each other, which allowed me to study that face, framed by the wimple, as Mother Dolores spoke into the recorder. Now, as a flattering device, nothing beats a wimple in focusing attention and hiding wrinkles. Mother Dolores has very few of those, belying the fact that she is now in her 70s. Of course, this was written in 2013, but started in 2003. So she's got to be close to 90 right now. So wimple, that must be maybe what goes around the nun's face. All right, let's continue. Her face is still beautiful, her blue eyes large and expressive, settle into a thoughtful gaze as she delves into the past, now pensive as she conjures the odor of vanilla beans being ground into powder in her grandma's home, now bright and mischievous as she recalls a tomboy acting out the neighborhood roughnecks by being the last kid to get out of the way of an approaching train. Good Lord, Dolores. Playing train chicken. I'm shocked. Now her eyes are moist as she relives playing a clarinet solo on a late-night TV show for her grandfather as he lay dying. Frequently troubled, hesitant at the prospect of speaking publicly about the mystery of enclosed religious life, and they can flash too in an unexpected explosion of temper. The lady has a temper. Now and then, my attention would be gently interrupted by the ever so slight movement of her feet. Her special shoes, sensible and protective, cannot conceal the motion of pain-plagued feet inside, moving constantly, trying without much success to find a comfortable resting place. It was something we never averred because this was our working time, our professional time. Where shall we start? Well, how about flashbacks in a movie? Tell me things I don't know, he asked Dolores. Well, did you know I ran away from home once? So we're gonna read the story about her running away from home, but I've got to say, there are some of you that live with constant pain. I've seen your emails. Melissa has a lot of pain in her life. The subscriber series, which we need to get back to. I'm sorry to hear that. That's terrible. I know a small part of it every once in a while with my back. I play a lot of tennis, play a lot of golf, and sometimes I get sciatic nerve issues, and sometimes that can be pretty constant for a while until I get it stretched out or use a TENS unit on it. So that's horrible. So what Dolores is going through with this constant pain in her feet that she's had neuropathy for decades. Gosh. Okay, here's Dolores' story about running away from home. Probably because she got yelled at for standing in front of a train and playing chicken. Dolores says, I ran away from home when I was 4 years old. I ran away in the middle of the night with my mother. We were leaving my grandparents' house on Hermitage Avenue in Chicago, where we had been living after Daddy left for Hollywood. He had gotten a contract with MGM Studio, and Mommy and I were going to join him. We were running away because Granny and Grandpa were dead set against Daddy. They thought he was good for nothing. We sneaked out of the house very quietly, but as soon as we reached the street, I suddenly remembered that I had left my panda bear behind in Granny's bedroom. I started crying. So Mommy slipped back into the house and retrieved my beloved bear while Granny slept peacefully. Now, I don't remember if Mommy handed the bear to me or me to the bear. I was only 2 inches taller than the panda. The two of us had to sit on Mommy's lap for most of the train trip because she could only afford one seat. But we didn't care. We were going to go see Daddy in Hollywood. We rode for what seemed like years. Now, it was the beginning of World War II, and I remember there were so many soldiers and sailors on the train, all so much taller than Panda and I, that it was like a forest of uniformed pant legs. I remember looking out the window and seeing the beautiful California desert for the first time, and then, against the background of a bright sunset, tall, slender trees with feathers blooming on top. They were palms, and I was to discover that California had thousands and thousands of them. Over the next several years, this route would become a familiar journey, but the magic of the palm trees against the Pacific curtain of the sky would never fail to take my breath away. Four years earlier, in January of 1938, Dolores' future parents were just graduating from high school, where they had been sweethearts since the 8th grade. Edmund Burdell Lehan Hicks, named Bert, was 17 years old, and Harriet Lee Pittman, why is that name familiar? Was only 16. Both had eye-catching good looks and shared tattoos acquired in a moment of youthful recklessness. Wow, our parents had tattoos in the 40s or 50s. Never heard of that. I mean, I'm sure they existed, obviously, but interesting. Decades before tattoos on teenagers came into vogue. Harriet's tattoo, however, remained unfinished. While the tattoo artist was working on hers, Bert passed out, and that ended the session. Shared too were dreams of marriage and careers in the movies. The latter was temporarily put on hold when they had to marry earlier than planned. I wonder if that has to do with her being conceived. The circumstance caused Harriet's mother, Esther Bowen, and stepfather, Fred Coode, both of whom frowned on the relationship, a great deal of grief and spawned a serious but brief consideration of abortion. Harriet, in a characteristic show of defiance, totally rejected this advice. Esther and Fred reluctantly agreed that this wild, good-for-nothing son-in-law, even though there would never be any affection between them and him, and Esther paid for all of the maternity expenses. The it's early in the morning. I gotta remember how to talk again, because I haven't talked for 6 hours sleeping. The newlyweds were forced to move in with the Coods, but as soon as they could afford it, they set up housekeeping in a small apartment in Chicago, adjacent to well-traveled train tracks. Harriet found employment as a secretary, while Bert tried various endeavors, including truck driver, furniture mover, and salesman for ladies' shoes. He did not, however, settle down to the responsibilities of marriage, and this, combined with his drinking, caused increasingly frequent arguments between the young couple. I can already see some potential reasons for Dolores to seek answers. You know, the PTSD, some of that stuff causes a child. You know, the fighting, all that stuff. They say by the time we're 4, a lot of the traumatic events that happen to us shape and mold us into who we are, how we react to certain things. Now, instead of trying to work things out themselves, the two kids, which is what they were, took their gripes, Rashomon style, to their respective families who were not stingy with advice. That's a bad thing as well, talking trash to your family about your significant other. That's irreparable right there is what it is. After particularly violent arguments when Bert drunk would strike her, Harriet would run back home to Esther and Fred. The next day, refusing their advice to leave him, she would go back to her husband. Despite the increasing abuse of her, sometimes provoking police intervention, Harriet remained in love with him. The arrival of Dolores Marie Hicks at 10:30 a.m. on October 20th, 1938 was cause for great celebration in both the Hicks and the Bowen clans. See, she was the first grandchild and served temporarily to patch the cracks in her parents' marriage. Bert adored his daughter. With huge blue eyes, she was a beautiful baby, beneficiary of the drop-dead gorgeous genes that ran so generously through both sides of her family. So, this is Dolores writing a little paragraph to her daddy. To my father, I was Pumpkin, but I was named after my great aunt Frida, who that same year became Sister Dolores Marie. Oh, wow. In the order of Saint Joseph of Carondelet in St. Louis. So her great aunt was a nun. Mommy brought me to her investiture because my aunt was hopeful that I would be baptized in the church at the same time. There was precedent because Daddy had been baptized Catholic. He was even an altar boy. So was I. I was an altar boy. Though he had never practiced his religion enough to be considered fallen away. The baptism wasn't destined to happen, however, not then. The church didn't allow it, so I wasn't baptized until 10 years later. Well, we're learning some things about Dolores that we had no clue about, right? No clue at all. There's still 2 flies in here. My wife suggested I should let the cats in here. They would take care of these flies. Always during spring and summertime, we got the trash can that's kind of outside the house. I need to move that sucker like down to the street and keep it there. Because they come in here and then I've got to get rid of them. Anyways, but I don't allow cats in here because they'll get all over the place and put hair and fur everywhere, and they have their home upstairs. Anyhow, let's continue reading. Dolores was born into families that could easily be the hard-edged versions of the zany Sycamores in that year's Oscar-winning picture, You Can't Take It With You. Her paternal grandfather, John W. Lyon, called Jack, came from a wealthy railroad clan. The family line dated back to the 19th century England and Sir Thomas Atkins, a member of Queen Victoria's Palace Guard. His service to the Queen earned Tommy, as he was called, such royal affection that he was knighted. Additionally, Her Majesty presented him with the christening gown of baby Prince Alfred, which was passed down through generations of Dolores' family. Legend has it that Tommy, the universally used nickname for British soldiers in wide currency from the 1880s through World War I, was in honor of Sir Thomas and memorialized by Rudyard Kipling in his 1892 Barrack Room Ballads. So she comes from this famous line of people, too. Added to the English mix were Dutch, French, Irish, Welsh, and Norwegian, as well as a touch of the exotic, a red-headed Jewess from Spain, and an American Indian. In 1871, the Atkins side of the family settled in Chicago, where they saw their home burned to the ground in the Great Fire. The Great Fire of Chicago. Does anybody know about that? I know about the Great Fire of Rome. I don't know if I've heard about the Great Fire of Chicago. Maybe there's a tickle in my memory. The entire Atkins Hicks tribe was church-going, with religious convictions as varied as their nationalities. Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, as well as Christian Science and Mormon. Really? Okay, so Christian Science, which would be Scientology, probably. Dolores' great-grandparents, Reuben and Eliza Atkins, English converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, moved from England to Salt Lake City to join Brigham Young. Really? But when that leader espoused polygamy, Atkins refused to take another wife, earning the leader's wrath. The couple was ordered to leave Salt Lake City within 24 hours. Jack and Dolores' paternal grandmother met in college, where Jack was a blackface performer in minstrel shows, giving vent to an urge to perform that had been thwarted by his parents' insistence that he study to become a doctor. Mary Atkins, known as May, was the daughter of successful farmers. She had hoped to become an actress, traveling for a short time with a theatrical group, performing at resorts in Indiana and Wisconsin. But at the turn of the century, an actress was considered half a step above a trollop. So her family pushed her into a teaching career in speech and dramatic arts. Jack, a Catholic, and May, a convert at marriage, produced 3 children: John, Bert, and Betty. Now, Bert obviously is Dolores' father. Sometimes when you're reading about all these relatives and people, it's easy to get lost in the details. But Jack was not a model head of the household. There we go. He was a physically abusive husband and father, whose main targets were his wife and second son, Bert, both of whom were subject to severe physical pain, I guess. May, in turn, compensated for this abuse by overprotecting Bert by babying and spoiling him. The cruelty and maltreatment over the next 5 years rose to such a level that finally even her priest advised May to divorce her husband. She took the priest's advice, repeatedly refusing Jack's pleas to reconcile, preferring to rear her children alone. Pretty common back then, I would say. I don't know if pretty common, but gosh. Ain't right. But, my father endured some of the same sort of abuse, and he was definitely abusive as well. Just members of my family had that back in the day, the grandparents. And, I guess, when you go to war, if you went to war, or during those Great Depression times, it doesn't give you an excuse, but it certainly puts everybody on edge. And if you got high blood pressure, if you were abused, before as a child too, it's just a cycle. It's a horrible cycle, and you got to break it. Got to break it. I think the only time I spanked one of my sons was when he ran out in front of a car. It was a gentle enough tap on the butt, but enough to make him, oh my gosh, I just got smacked in the butt. It's the only time I've ever hit my kids. Now, not that you have to or you don't have to, but I think doing anything in anger is not going to lead to good results for the kids or for you. It's my own personal opinion. All right, so in 1929, May took a second husband, James Earl Hicks, whom she had met at a political convention. A tall man with Clark Gable good looks, Hicks didn't have Liam's formal education or money-backed background, but he promised to be a more affable family man. May's second union added 3 girls, Gladys, Shirley, and Virginia, to the first family of 3, all of whom Hicks adopted. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. Hicks turned out to be only a sometimes jolly parent. Gladys sincerely remembered that he could also be unbelievably mean. Oh my goodness. And isn't there any good people out there? I'm just kidding. People that are not mean? He was too rough on Bert, whose dependency upon his mother grew stronger. His siblings remembered that Bert was always involved in some theatrical venture or another. He figured out early that all he needed to get by were his good looks and bad boy charm, a tactic that separated him from his older brother John, who was, even at an early age, ambitious and hardworking. Now, in the mid-1930s, after several successful years as a manufacturer of flavored butter spreads, Hicks lost his business. He was forced to move his family into a modest flat on the north side of Chicago. Money was scarce, though he managed to scrape together enough to have a nice Christmas in 1935. But on that Christmas day, Hicks left the house on an errand and never came back. Honey, I'm going out for milk. Bye. It's like a country song. Jeez. So he left, leaving May to raise all 6 children. Excuse me. Alone in the middle of the Great Depression. Guess he just couldn't, so he lost his business. I wonder, during that time, a lot of people took their lives. They took their own lives during that time. So I wonder if that's what happened. So, little quote here from Dolores. Of all my ancestral transgressors of laws, or moral codes, or commandments, the one I find difficult to forgive is Grandpa Hicks. He may have been suffering. He had just lost his business and couldn't provide for his family. And perhaps he felt like he couldn't live up to the tenets of his Christian Science beliefs. But he walked out on his family at Christmas, and to my mind, that was not Christian. That was a sin. May Hicks now could have taken her children and gone home to the family farm, but she was ferociously proud. She wouldn't ask anyone, including her parents, for anything. See, she resolved to leave teaching for better paying employment, but she went from one low-paying job to another until she and her children found themselves and all of their belongings on the sidewalk. Young Bert was especially upset, flying into a rage, breaking windows, and creating havoc. It was the first time the family became aware of his violent side. You do as you learn. You do sometimes as you have done to you. If you don't have a better example to come along and calm that side of you. The Salvation Army came to their aid, moving the family temporarily into their home for women and children, and helping May land a job demonstrating Singer sewing machines at the Marshall's Field Department Store. Oh, Marshall's. May rose with regular promotions to the promotion and the position of buyer in the furniture department. While she was working, her first family took on the responsibility of caring for her second family. So kids, raising kids. That was a big thing back in the day, wasn't it? Or in those single income families, especially when the father leaves. All right, so took on the responsibility of caring for the second family in their new home, a duplex on Chicago's west side. But she never forfeited her position as matriarch and maintained a strong influence on her children, investing them with a keen awareness of the hard realities of life. She saw to it that all of them attended church every Sunday, and she passed on her signature optimism. Even during the blackest days, her mantra was, things are going to get better. That's good. That's a good optimist. So Dolores says, I remember her as genteel and high class. In many ways, the perfect foil for my other grandmother, who had more than a passing acquaintance with the mean streets of Chicago. So, any of y'all, A lot of people remember their grandparents, have a relationship with their grandparents, or had. My grandma, Helen, lived with me, lived with us, kind of bounced around with my father and my aunts and uncles. Um, she was a Catholic, and I remember she used to sign all of her letters agape, which I think is it's an organization within the Catholic Church that's about charity, I believe. Um, but the stories I heard was that she was abusive back in the day when she was younger to my father. Um, I didn't know my grandfather. He passed away, I think, when I was 2. But did y'all get a chance to know enough about your grandparents to be able to talk to them, like, or talk about them, like Dolores here? I'm just kind of curious if y'all have any stories about grandparents. You know. All right, so Esther Pittman Brown, though of a different class, was on a par of rank with May. She was also a beauty, but what made the two women close, now this is her other grandmother, was that Esther was an equally proud and strong lady. Having been born poor, she learned early how not to get pushed around. And this is a little quote from Dolores. She loved to tell the story of how she walked to school without shoes in 18-degree weather, not because she didn't have shoes, she did have one pair, but just to show the kids how tough she was. I went to school when it was snow outside and 5 below zero, and I walked uphill backwards. It reminds me of the story like that. Walking to school without shoes in 18-degree weather. So Esther, her other grandmother, was thrice wed. The first time, age 16, to Lee Pittman, Harriet's father. Shortly after Harriet's birth, Pittman got a teenage girl pregnant. Now, when Esther learned of this, she did 2 things. She demanded he shave every hair off of his body because if he was going to behave like a baby, he was going to look like one. And he did as he was told, is what Dolores wrote here. Then Esther divorced him so that he could marry the pregnant girl. Her name was Helen, with whom he had a long, happy marriage and 7 children. The resilient Esther remained friendly with her first husband, now a Catholic convert, and saw to it that Harriet did the same. So Harriet would be, I guess, the daughter. Yeah, okay. So they stayed close with the father and the other family. Okay. I have to get myself together. Just all these names. I don't know these people. I'm trying to figure out this story of Dolores and what led her to this, to being a nun, to being a mother. Yeah. So Harriet and her father were close for his entire life, and she often brought Dolores, with her when she visited his home in Williamsfield, Illinois. So I'm guessing, if I remember right, Harriet must be her mother, Dolores' mother. Yes. Okay, so that's the wraparound here. When Harriet was 9, Esther married her second husband, Paul Brown, who was a preacher and a wife-beater. Everybody in that family seems to be, at least the guys, seem to be no good. One day Brown took off for California, and he never came back. Alone with mounting bills, Esther got a job as a waitress at a local bar and grill called the Round Table, a job she would keep for the rest of her life. Now, after Esther's second divorce, Fred Coode, a projectionist at a local movie house, entered her life. This union would provide the stable core in Dolores' early years. When Dolores was 2 years old, Bert and Harriet separated. Her mom and dad. Okay? The first of many partings in their turbulent union. Those 2 years had been frustrating ones for Bert, who drifted from one meaningless job to another, increasing fearful that fame and fortune would elude him. He began to drink more and more heavily, and was abusive to his wife as his father had been to his mother. But his brother remembered Bert had to get drunk to be as cruel as our father was when he was sober. Pretty bad there. At one time or another, Dolores' paternal aunts all witnessed violent outbreaks, with Harriet running, screaming from Bert's attacks, sometimes carrying tiny Dolores in her arms. See, yeah. Okay, I'm going to pause it right there. It's page 11. Terrible. Terrible to experience that as a child, and I know that because I experienced it. With both my mothers and my father. Heck, maybe that's why I considered being a priest or a pastor. I think when your example of Heavenly Father, I mean, our parents are examples of God. That's just the truth of it. They're a higher power as we're growing up. And if your higher power is that way, sometimes you seek that solace in somebody that's supposed to be all loving, all merciful. Anyhow, thanks for joining me. And good morning for those of you that's going to watch it in the morning. Good afternoon and good evening. This is Joe Sends Wherever's Photos. Thank you again for being who you are and for loving Elvis and, being curious about it. I'm kind of curious how popular or how unpopular this series is going to be. I know it's not going to be as popular as Child Bride or some of the other books, the Are You Lonesome Tonight series, but I'm going to read it anyways because this is a part of Elvis's life. There's a reason why Elvis was attracted to Dolores. There's a reason why Elvis was enthralled with her and why they spent time and he was attracted to her goodness. And Dolores has her own story here and her own sacrifices and her own stardom. She was a talented actress. Not just because she's beautiful and had those sparkling blue eyes and looked so sweet, but because she was a talented person. And we're seeing that her parents wanted to be actors and in Hollywood. So it probably wasn't a dream of hers. She was probably living it for her parents. Well, this is Joe Sends Wherever's Photos, TCBTLC. Have a wonderful day. Do something kind for yourself. Reach out to somebody. Do not be alone.